and we'll get Johnny Million back in and just when bring you in. But at the very least, Chicago, we'll call it for a second and the other side of the news.
Hal, can you?
Oh, Hal. Can't hear you.
I hear you too, Phil. I just don't hear Hal.
There we go. Check.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, cool.
I hear you.
Things as soon as I fix camera, square motion, simple change. Me and Johnny. Let's go back to here. There's Johnny, and we'll put him in here. Ta-da! Oh man. So not sure what that was. Just a major like internet death. But yeah. But we managed to pull it out in the end.
Hey, Phil.
And then we'll go to this guy right here.
Oh, yeah.
Then, hold on one second. I'll
Do you have to restart the YouTube?
Yes. I had to restart everything for some reason. We're not quite sure why. It's, you know, hey, it's the internet. It's stuff. Excrement occurs, as they say. But we're up and running, and we couldn't be happier. And it's lovely. Okay, there we go. And we go to this, and we go green screen. There we go. And we select a backdrop, and we use this guy, and you pow. And then there you are. And turn your fade level down a little bit. Hold on. Takes you a minute. And you just do it like that. That's the easier way. And me, and we'll just fix these things while we're waiting for Chicago to come back. And I think they can hear me okay, so we should be all right. I'm a little bit delayed, but that's okay. All right. And we've had worse. Slowly, like, I can never quite know what's going on in the, you know, internet neighborhood, especially in a new place. And I have gotten pretty good at managing both my own internal expectations in these circumstances and my own like mood, as it were, where, you know, I used to panic quite a bit, and now I'm like, you know, it's all part of it. This is what happens.
What you gonna do?
Yeah, what you gonna do? You don't even know. There we go. And oh, I see. That's funny.
It looks like Chicago is just going to air the audio from YouTube.
Okay. Because they should be able to get us now. They should be. Everything should be fine now. But you know, I understand. I think that's wise. And we'll
said that the audio sounds really good on YouTube.
Oh, good. All right.
Yeah.
I try. Whew. Johnny May.
We'll bring you in 5 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you, Phil? Did you see the Kadyrov gas station explosion?
Program. Megaworldwide.
Yep.
Welcome back to the show. Sorry for the internet kerfuffle. You know, you can never really tell when things are gonna, when the bits are gonna hit the fan in internet world. So I appreciate your guys' patience when we deal with those kind of moments. And we are live and back on with our dear friend Philip Bittner, host of On the Edge, and a frequent guest of Hal Sparks Megaworldwide on Wednesdays and on this show until such time as the Ukrainians reclaim their land as such. And we will keep this on the radar, as he has been doing such a great job doing as well. Also, Johnny Million's with us. He's got a live stream 2 times a week. It's Johnny Million on YouTube and Twitch. I highly recommend you you subscribe. And then, of course, on Twitch, if you want to subscribe, it costs money on Twitch. But if you have Amazon Prime, it doesn't cost you a dime. So you can pay for a subscription for his and get mine for free, or vice versa. It doesn't matter, whichever. It's a lot of fun, and you get to throw emojis at the screen, and it's a joy. It's very silly and weird. So in the meantime, though, if I may, I woke up this morning in my regular check-in on what's going on in Ukraine, to a huge explosion in the Chechen capital, I think it was.
Grozny,
Yeah, in Grozny, with this gas station next to a fuel depot, which is, where you put it. Safety third. And there's a video of it. I don't know if people have seen this. But if you look online, you can see it. Like, the explosions are right out of an action film. And there's one shot that somebody got with their phone where there's literally a tank, a gas tank, like a giant cylinder, rolling down the road towards them, like something Mel Gibson would try to outrun in an action movie, which, for the record, you can't. But it's extraordinary, and and most people would think this is just run-of-the-mill stupidity on the part of, I guess, the Chechen government and their lack of regulations and all that stuff that eventually lead to things blowing up. But there's also this fight going on between Kadyrov and Russian oligarchs, Phil, as I understand it.
Yeah. I mean, part of the Russian Federation, but Dagestani is what it looks like. And, that neck of the woods is very, very difficult. Not everybody gets along with one another, much less gets along with Moscow.
Right.
Dagestan is a southern republic in the Russian Federation, which has actually fought against Moscow in the past in collaboration with Chechen rebels. But the Chechen rebels who fought the war in the 90s, or the two wars in the 90s against Moscow, but then Kadyrov was installed by Moscow and is really just a puppet. He doesn't hold any of the the guys that fought against Moscow were they were hill people with a certain tribalism, clan or tribalism, like Highland clans.
Yeah, sure.
In Scotland. And they practiced a pretty mild version of Islam, which is to say, not involved in the current jihad or the kind of international jihad.
Right.
And they were put down violently. Kadyrov was put in, but there's no love lost between a lot of these guys in southern, in the Caucasus, in Dagestan or Ossetia or Abkhazia. These little republics that make up the Caucasus, not to mention the Georgians, the Armenians, and the Azeris. So, I'm not terribly surprised that Kadyrov has enemies in Dagestan. So that could have something to do with this. This could be Ukrainians, although I'm not. I wouldn't be inclined to say this was Ukrainian involved because, again, there's enough discontent in the Caucasus that Ukraine doesn't necessarily have to get involved. I mean, it might as well be like Georgians for all we know, although I think that's unlikely. Again, I think this is I think this is a regional struggle between Kadyrov and some other power brokers within the Caucasus republics in the Russian Federation. So, but pretty amazing footage there. There's also some. I think there's some footage out of somewhere in Luhansk. An oil depot. When it does come down to the Ukrainian efforts, it does seem like that they are targeting oil and they are targeting ammo depots.
Yeah.
So while I wouldn't put this thing in Grozny past the Ukrainians, I'm still more inclined to think that it's something kind of a local squabble between warlords in the Caucasus.
Right. Well, okay, they're obviously targeting the lifeblood of an army, which is its fuel and its ammunition, is a tradition as old as warfare. I mean, it is the purpose of a siege anyways. It's what the Russians ultimately are trying to do with Ukraine. Like they attacked 3 grain ships for the first time since that deal was made at the beginning of the war. There were 3 grain ships attacked that head out of Odessa, and they go. There's like this narrow corridor. Most of them go. They basically leave Odessa and make a hard right and head towards whatever Romania or Moldova in that direction. And then they go around the edge of the Black Sea to protect themselves. They don't go directly across, but there's a thin line of ships that goes through the center that was part of this agreement that has been bringing stuff, down towards Turkey and the like. And the Russians, by and large, because of that deal they made with the United States and others, have been leaving them alone. They attacked 3 of them this week, which is, again, if you want to talk about an escalation of the war, caused by somebody apropos of nothing. These were not armed shipments. They were just simply food coming out of Ukraine to other places. Basically, this is their attempt to, I guess, starve Africans and make them mad at Ukraine, because that's where that grain would largely go.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of international. All 3 ships have flown under different international flags, so it's not like they were striking at Ukrainian flagged ships. Yeah, no, it's well. Look, whether or not it was the primary intent or not, they're going to start causing food instability.
Right.
If they keep this up already, I mean, that's tons and tons of food going to primarily the Horn of Africa or the subcontinent. That's generally, not exclusively, but generally where a lot of Ukrainian grain goes.
Right.
So those are the places that are going to be, struggling, and they don't care. They don't care. They just want to cause instability and tension and put pressure on the global community in a hope that they're going to come to the table with Ukraine under duress, and it's not going to happen. So all they're going to do is cause a lot of instability in places where people are looking at food and this basic commodity and weaponizing it. So,
again,
typical for Moscow.
Is there a chance this has nothing to do with the Ukrainian conflict? I mean, a marginal, of course, has some to do with it, but it has, as much to do with the moves that Russia has been making in Africa for a while, and their destabilization of areas in there where they're trying to, if they make up for whatever they've lost in this war by taking resources from Africa. That's where they're getting most of the gold they're selling to China. China has, one of the big maggot talking points is how much gold that China is accumulating, and how important that is to the, to the world economic, system, the pretty rock and where it goes. And it's all Russian gold stolen from Darfur, effectively, from the Sudan during that conflict, which they've been egging on, which the world has all but forgotten about. Again, a death toll higher than Gaza, higher than Lebanon combined, and yet we shrug it off. And the Russians have been up to their shoulders in it and driving trucks full of, we saw early reports of the Wagner's group driving trucks of gold out of Sudan at the beginning of this conflict, and it has never stopped.
Yeah, well, their colonialism in Africa is ongoing as they influence African nations to, with it's not hard to do because of the history of colonization in Africa.
Right.
But you're just swapping one colonizer for another.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. But what they're also doing is supporting this group against that group. It's the same old tactic.
But it's
that Moscow
destabilization.
always employs,
They're not on
which
either
is,
side.
It's
right.
destabilization, and it's divide and conquer, which is what they always do. That is their consistent technique, is to weaken your opponent or to destabilize a region and take advantage of it in the chaos that ensues.
Right.
It's we've seen it time and time again. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
No.
They do not care. Africa, they don't care about Africa. Africa is a means to an end.
Yeah. Well, and that's why they don't have to side with the
I can absolutely see them starving Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, and because if there's no one there to stop them, or no one's got the strength to fight back, driving away with trucks full of gold gets easier and easier, and whatever resources they want. I mean, it obviously isn't. It could be gold, but gold and cobalt and whatever they would want to steal on behalf of the Chinese instead of purchasing it like the rest of the world does. And as bad as the conditions are in Africa, in some of those areas, imagine if those goods are no longer purchased, they're just taken by a ruling group. And that's effectively what Russia seems to be building through Sudan and Darfur and their integration with, these brutal death squads that are down there. And again, the normal cast of idiots seems to be just shrugging it off. It's strange to me that if America does it, it's bad, and I agree, and we shouldn't do it, and we don't. We, by and large, because we have stopped doing that kind of stuff over the last few decades because our own people won't stand for it. There's not that problem in both Russian leadership or in the Russian public, it seems, about those same activities. As a matter of fact, they think it's, like you've talked about many times, that the concept of empire is, and might makes right, is integral to the culture, it seems.
Yeah, and as long as the empire benefits, they'll overlook it. And there is no genuine interest in Africa. It is again, as I say, it's a means to an end. Mm-hmm. They're perfectly happy with empire and the concept of empire. We don't like it. Even when we engage in it, we don't like it.
Right.
But in Russia, it is not only.
Yeah, sorry. It's why there's so much talk about the CIA in this country, is because we are concerned that covertly we are destabilizing and doing all these things all the time, and we don't like it. And there's the suspicion that it's happening, even if we don't, as a public, want it to happen. That's why there's so much talk about the CIA. The reason there's no talk about the Kremlin and the KGB and some sort of disenfranchisement or separation between the two is because it's understood that that's the whole point. The Kremlin does it openly.
That's the point.
They're proud of it, right? It's amazing,
and it's encouraged.
Yeah,
and they're proud of it, and they teach the general perception that is enforced by what is taught.
Yeah,
is that. It's something Putin regurgitates all the time. Russia knows no borders. Russia has no borders.
Yeah,
it's a slogan that they repeat all the time.
Right,
and it's interesting. It is interesting to me, to having lived in both the East and in the West, is that one of the things that differentiates ourselves from the East, from Moscow, is that we don't like it. Right. That's why we protest empire. We don't like it.
Right.
Having been a colony in our past, we're very uncomfortable with the concept of empire.
Right.
In Russia, it's not even a question. It's not even brought up. It's not discussed. There is no pushback. There are no protests.
Yeah.
You will not see a protest in Moscow. You will not see a protest in St. Petersburg. against Russian Empire, and we shouldn't be interfering in other nations' affairs. That will not happen in Russia,
Right.
because might makes right, and it is still a very imperial mindset, and this is why they have to lose the Ukrainian war. They have to be beaten in Ukraine because they have to
learn this lesson.
They have to abandon the concept of empire
In modern times, they have to learn this lesson,
empire.
right?
Again, this is a Timothy Snyder lecture that he gives about it's actually in the end better when an empire loses an imperial war.
Yeah.
Because then they go, oh, this is something we should not be involved with. And it's detrimental to it. I mean, you could argue that the post-World War, the American adventurism in the post-World War II era, if it was empire, one of the reasons it was defeated and why those military adventurism wars didn't succeed is because our people don't like it.
Right.
Our people protest it. Our people come out and say, no, we don't want to be in Vietnam.
Right.
No, we don't want to be in Iraq. Not to say that those were the traditional kind of empire that Russia is trying to enforce.
But we saw them as such.
Russia is still trying to enforce kind of 19th century, but we saw them as such. And we were unhappy with it. So we protested it. You won't see that in Russia.
That's right. Let's take a break.
Part of the reason why we have to support Ukraine.
Yeah, we blew past the break, so let's take a quick one, and then we'll come back right after this, and we're going to start taking our questions from the chat room as well at infotainmentwars.com. We will be buying the InfoWars desk once it comes up for sale. When all the gear there is for sale, we'll jump. Yeah. We're gonna get that. I'm gonna put it somewhere. I'm gonna tour with it. I'm gonna bring it everywhere on a flatbed. We'll be back right after this.
Yeah, you are.
There are a couple of things where the conversation about this stuff points out very specifically the flaw in the argument that Republicans are making that are pro-Russia, or even, quite frankly, some of the what I would call the faux-aggressive, pro-Hamas crowd are making, because there is a difference between people who care about. Obviously, there's a difference between people.
We're coming back.
Thank you. People who care about the Palestinians versus the people who are basically just Hamas front people. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Program, Megaworldwide.
Coming back. Welcome back to the show. I'm Hal Sparks, Johnny Million, and Philip Bittner are joining me today. And I want to remind everybody, like, subscribe. Also, I have a podcast, the Hal Sparks Podcast, Megaworldwide. You can subscribe to it wherever your podcasts are gotten from. You must do it. You must do it, because it's an audio version of what I do during the week, the parts that you can listen to and understand without needing visual assistance in that regard. And so it pulls out those pieces just, in shorter clips and that kind of stuff for you guys to listen to, and more bite-sized morsels, as it were. That said, the latest one is about Greg Kelly, and I got to say, it's pretty choice. That said, let's jump to some questions, because I know I will get down a history hole with Philip, and we will get lost down that direction. So what do we have, Johnny?
I don't have a ton yet, but I've got one here from Mary P. Please ask Phil if what's happening now with Russia is starting what could become a true civil war.
Yeah, I mean, the potential is certainly there. There's also there's the question of, because the Russian Federation is made up of a whole bunch of different republics, is that necessarily a civil war? If Dagestan, for example, which we just discussed, were to decide, if there was a power vacuum in the Kremlin, to flee from the Federation, is that a civil war? Is that a separatist movement?
Right.
Where is the sovereignty, and where does that question lie? Because Russia, as an empire, again, has been expanding throughout its history constantly. So they have absorbed land and territory that wasn't originally, part of, certainly not part of Muscovy, the Principality of Muscovy, which is where this all really started several hundred years ago. Is that a civil war, or is that a fragmentation of an empire? I would argue it is. Now, could there be a civil war in what is legitimately considered, Russia or Muscovy, what have you? And that is to say, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Sochi, Yekaterinburg, all of these places that are kind of European Russia. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There could be a civil war. There are a lot of, disturbingly, there's a growth of what are called PCMs, and that's personal or PMC. Sorry, personal military companies, which is what we saw with Prigozhin. He's not the only one. The Wagner Group is not the only one that is a private militia. And I think as this gets worse, and because the structure of Russia is built around a strong central government at the head of which sits a czar, Vladimir Putin. If you were to remove Vladimir Putin, the center of gravity would disappear. And so I could see various factions going at one another until they have dominance. Because I think Putin's time is very limited. No Russian leader survives losing what he has lost in this war.
Yeah.
So is the potential there for a power struggle that is fought out on the streets, even a power struggle that's fought out on the streets among, certain warlords or powerful members of the, the defense ministry or a regional governor or an intelligence or even an oligarch with all the money that he has. And they start to, it's the old analogy of back in the Russian Empire, when a situation like this would occur, and it did happen throughout their history. You remove the czar, and then the boyars, the aristocracy, fight amongst themselves until one develops primacy, and then he rises to the status of czar. I certainly don't see a democracy just suddenly springing up in Russia anytime soon, but I do see the possibility of a power struggle, and that, in essence, would be a civil war. So it's possible. Yeah, it's absolutely 100% possible. As a matter of fact, we better be preparing for it because it's a large possibility. And even if it doesn't happen, then great. If it doesn't happen, I seriously hope that our intelligence is working on what to do, and State Department on what to do in the possibility of a fracturing of the Federation.
Right. There's and again, their attacks on grain ships, for example. They cause one of the ancillary costs. They cause the insurance rates to go up on shipping in the entire area. This includes Russian ships, which already have a hard time finding insurance for for their oil ships, just getting stuff out. So if they sink, they stay sunk. Nobody gets any money. Nobody gets to buy a new ship. Nobody gets to pay to build a new ship. And the Russians are having a hard time, even with, they're not insuring their own ships in large part. It's just, you buy your ticket, you take your chances, it seems to be the methodology there. Whereas, famously Lloyd's of London, known for, I guess, insuring Tina Turner's legs and Clint Eastwood's squint or whatever. Like, there are all these weird things that they were known for doing. One of the biggest things they do is they insure tankers and ships, like entire fleets of ships. Mm-hmm. So if a ship is destroyed by the Houthis or something like that, the cost of insuring things that will go through that same strait goes up, and that's become the norm for everybody. And one of the things that I've been struck by is the fact that the Houthis keep hitting Russian and Chinese ships, or Chinese ships with Russian oil, or what have you. Well, what does that ultimately do to Russia and China? Not a lot, because they're kind of screwed already. They're not going to replace that ship, so it doesn't affect their costs. The Chinese ship is just, the Russians would rather hook up a pipeline to China, so it makes it more likely that maybe long-term the Chinese would opt for that or something. But what it does do is drive up the cost of everyday things, including fuel, for the rest of the world. So while we've got sanctions on them, one of the ways that they can create sanctions on the rest of the world is driving up insurance costs by coordinating with people to attack their own stuff. It's a strange tactic, but it would absolutely work. Tell the Houthis they can attack whoever they want, and if they hit one of ours and it goes down, it's going to drive up the cost of those ships. You can just put a dummy ship with no oil in it or very little, run it through there, let them sink it, and it will drive up the cost of insurance for all the goods going through that area. And so if inflation is a weapon that will get Donald Trump back in office, it's one of the ways you can weaponize it. And it's too easy to do it. That's why the tariff stuff that Trump is talking about won't work. Because a tariff just makes you susceptible to any country that wants to cut off goods to you. They just no longer want to do business with you, or you're involved in war. They just won't ship to you anymore. Why bother? Ship it to your enemies. Ship it to your near allies. Is your power just going out? Is that what happened?
No.
Or just your light?
That's fine. No,
Okay.
Just that light.
Okay, we got to take a break.
Yeah,
we'll be
well,
back
no,
right
I
after
mean,
this.
that's
Hold that
yeah.
thought. We got to take a break. Yeah, hold that
Yep.
thought, and we'll come back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Philip Bittner has a YouTube show called On the Edge. New episodes every Sunday. Check it out. We'll be back. Cool. Yeah. So I try to stay as close to the quarter and the half hour as I can. There you go.
There it is.
Sure.
But I get carried away sometimes.
Well,
and
this is my last week. This is my last week here.
Yeah, and then
Next week
Wow.
I'll be in transit. I'll be in transit. Or either that or I'll already be in the States. But
yeah,
this time next week I'll be moving around. So
right.
well, we were trying to get some episodes like in the library so that we could post them while I was away, but
Sure.
just not working. So I think we're just going to go on a hiatus. We'll just
Okay.
we'll miss a few weeks, but we'll see.
Well, you don't have to bring the sign with you. We could set you up with a graphic, and you could just do it,
There you
here
go.
or whatever. Take a really nice picture of your
That's
background. Just stand over there and get a really nice shot of it.
Could do.
Yep.
Could do.
And this should be a relatively a couple minutes, but the length of this one. Let's see. Red back. Let's see. Yeah.
Back in 5.
Okay. Here we come. Almost. There we go.
Attention. Stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back. So, and we got more questions, I think, now from our chat room, Johnny Million, do we? Yeah, jump right in.
Here we go, jumping right back in. This is from Greg Edmond. What is the latest info on Nepalese volunteers fighting for Russia?
I don't have anything new on Nepalese. Although there was a big thing about 2 weeks ago, I want to say, when Ukrainian forces took as prisoner of war a bunch of Nepalese guys. I mean, that is something that's been happening. Sadly, what will oftentimes happen is Russia will have, in essence, migratory workers that they'll let in to do, hard labor and, farming and things like that. And then they get stuck in Russia, their passports are taken, and they say, you got to join the armed forces. That's not unusual. That is a recurring thing that we've seen happen. We've also seen them recently expelling people from like Pakistan. So it's not always the same thing. But I don't have any new information on the Nepalese, but what we do hear in the last 36 hours or so is that there are literally thousands of North Korean soldiers who are being trained to work with Russian forces in Ukraine. And that, there's no two ways around it. That's expanding the war. That is a third party, officially, because DPRK doesn't just let its citizens come to Ukraine and fight. I mean, there are Westerners here in Ukraine fighting, but they are generally volunteers who sign up with the Legion or other fighting forces, but it's not an official deployment by a Western power. The DPRK, by sending thousands of its soldiers, North Korea is getting involved in the Russian-Ukrainian war directly. And that's expanding the scope of the conflict, because now you have a third nation state, not sending just weapons, but actually sending fighters. So again, it's we are worried about escalation, and that is why the West has been so reluctant to go overboard with just flooding the zone with weapons. But the more we drip, and the more we try to do a strategy of non-escalation, and the longer this drags on, the more the Russians are going to be inclined to escalate, and the more the Russians are the ones who are going to be pushing things that aren't just sending weapons for Ukrainian soldiers to take to the front, but who are rather are actually, by decision of the nation state, sending soldiers here. So, we got to stop this thing, and the best way to stop it is to help the Ukrainians win it.
Yeah, no question. We got another one, Johnny?
We sure do. This one is from Carol Cobb. Can you ask Phil if he thinks after Putin is gone, if we'll see info coming out of Russia similar to what we saw when the USSR fell? And if so, how long would that take?
Oh, I don't. I don't think that's going to happen, because I don't think there's going to be a honeymoon period like there was after the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended. I was at the tail end of that period, but I was in Moscow in the 90s. And there really was a sense of we're all going to put it behind us now. We literally were allowed. We had intelligence officers that were literally allowed to go into Russian KGB archives. Just, here you go. Go for it. Check out whatever you want to. Which is how we learned so many things about all the different spy and espionage efforts and information warfare efforts. This is how we learned about the story of the Indian Times of Bombay, I think it was, where where the Russians planted a story about AIDS being created to attack the African American community, or was it crack? No, it was AIDS.
It was AIDS.
It was AIDS. That's how we learned about the intricacies of how they did that, because we were given carte blanche. They didn't care. They were so desperate for our aid that this is going to be different. This will not be the collapse of the Soviet Union. This will be a fracturing of the Federation itself. There will be malice towards the West, because we will have won a tangible war by supporting Ukraine and destroying Russian Empire. I don't know how long that malice will last, because again, they might get desperate and blame it all on Putin and turn to the West again for aid, which I hope will do better than the last time in the 90s at the collapse of the Soviet Union. But I do not think there will be a repeat of the we're all friends now let's all sing Kumbaya, and we'll just open up all the doors to all our secrets because everybody's friends now. Please give us chicken wings, which is what they literally did.
Yeah.
They were desperate. If anybody remembers that era, there was Bush wings because George Walker Bush sent a whole bunch of chicken wings to Russia. Our kind of our excess. Yeah, and they called it chicken. They called them bush wings.
Wow, I don't even remember.
That ain't gonna happen again.
My question is that if it collapses as badly as it could, if he's toppled and that kind of stuff, will they be able to stop it anyways? Will there be anybody to run interference in that regard? Will there be any kind of organizational, control of it? Because at least there was a, bag of sand to golden idol transfer, Indiana Jones style, from the Soviet Union to Russia in that regard. I would say inverse almost. But if Putin falls or somebody snuffs him or he bugs out or something, and they're left with a leadership vacuum, if the international community doesn't jump in to help them reorganize themselves and go, hey, you guys need to figure out who your president is real quick. If we don't bother to do that for them, how who's gonna be guarding the hen house?
This is the question. Yeah, no, this is the big question: is how bad will the disintegration of the Russian Federation be? Because, as I described, you remove the center of gravity, and Russian society is created such that it is very centralized, going all the way to the Kremlin and to the Tsar, because he's not a president, he's a Tsar. In a worst case scenario, or among the worst case scenarios, is a situation where there is no one person to communicate with. There is no, there is no replacement in the Kremlin. It is a fragmentation, and there are warlords, and there are republics, and there are oligarchs, and there are personal military. And then who do you negotiate with?
Yeah.
About what? It's the.
How do you determine? How do you determine whose property is what after Russia. A fall like that? Like, will Kazakhstan be interested in the Russian nukes that are on their territory or not? Do they have any value for a country like Kazakhstan, or are they more trouble than they're worth? In management and in tension with their neighbors and that kind of stuff. Do they give them up like Ukraine did, or do they hang on to them just for the sake of it? And if they do.
Well, and look how it turned out for Ukraine when they gave up their nuclear weapons. They got invaded. So if you're Kazakhstan and you think that down the road Moscow might reestablish itself and come looking for you, do you keep Russia's nuclear arsenal on your territory?
And then how do you
so badly done?
Right, and how do you sever their control structure from those nuclear arms within your control to make sure that they don't have some sort of like remote ability to launch them anyways, because they are part of that structure. They're designed. There's doomsday provisions and all that kind of stuff, so that just like the ones we have, I guess, in Guam or other places, more than likely, right?
Here's our problem. I mean, really, when you knock it all down, to the central problem is we've always tried to kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
We've never said this is a problem that we have to confront because it is happening with or without us. We have to decide what our input is going to be in this thing because we have skin in the game. Because nobody lives in isolation, especially when you're talking about a nuclear powered, nuclear armed federation like Russia. If we keep thinking that we can kick the can down the road, or we can just stick our fingers in our ears and go, no, it isn't happening, like we did with Minsk 1 and 2 here in Ukraine, or with the whole the Budapest agreements, it ain't going to work. We have to confront the fact that Russia is in disintegration. Their empire is falling apart. It's an inevitability. They're not going to get Ukraine back. They're not going to have a Moscow-friendly government in Kiev. They're not going to have Odessa, and thereby their dominance of the Black Sea no longer exists. Without that, they cannot project power the way that the empire has done for centuries. So we better wake. And I look. I'm hoping that those voices within state, within the executive branch, and within defense and the Pentagon are definitely looking at this and saying we can no longer ignore the situation.
Yeah.
We have to deal with the situation.
It's got to be, yeah.
And I hope those voices are louder. I hope those voices are louder than the voices that say, let's just try and let them sort it out and try and manage the situation. We can't manage the situation.
No.
We have to be involved.
Agreed. And I don't think it is manageable. I also think there's less of an illusion this time around about the ramifications of this. I have to believe that they're aware and that there are people in there, in many of the same ways I think there were KGB folks that still grind about the fall of the USSR and are still working to enact some sort of revenge. That just like Elon Musk's mom and all of her friends are still pissed about apartheid falling and them losing their control structure and are still enacting some level of revenge. No wonder they've made good bedfellows during this time. Then I think there's also in our own government people that recognize that we were, I think naive about how well Russia would receive their newfound freedom when the USSR fell. And we just kind of did, as much as there were people who stormed in there and tried to make money with them and, in this growing, brand new economy with a lot of workers, a lot of tech. But
the reforms that need to be made in Russia are going to be very, very difficult.
Yes.
You are restructuring a society, a culture, a nation, an empire that has existed for centuries based on some very different ideals of what governance and power and relationship between
but they've lived at least since the 90s. Yeah, I was just saying, at least under the illusion.
We opted for the easier. We opted for the easier option. With there's a strong man in Moscow. We think we can work with him. That's going to be easier to tackle than the actual reforms that everybody who studies Russia or the Russians themselves know that needs to be made. Those are difficult reforms, and we opted for the easier of the two options, and it was a huge mistake.
Agreed.
We should have, and those of us, and I don't want to toot my own horn here too loudly because I was amongst many experts and many people who study this region who were yelling very loudly, especially after the apartment bombings in 1998, which rose Putin to power. This is not a guy we can negotiate with. And we also can't negotiate with a Russia that doesn't tackle the fundamental infrastructural problems that they have and the cultural problems that they have that is going to take a very long time to enact. And we went for the easier option with trying to work with a killer who had imperial aspirations and was an intelligence officer of the Soviet Union.
Right.
We thought, it still boggles my mind, but there were voices in the U.S. and Western governments saying, it's going to be just easier for us to deal with this Putin guy. The long-term result of that is we now find ourselves on the precipice of a third world war.
Right, because
and that's not hyperbole.
Right, no, because of his optional decision to attack a country at whim, and no sign that would ever stop. We got to take another break, but I would argue that Russia itself has lived at least under the illusion of democracy for a period of time and had at least the illusion of connection to the rest of the world, which it did not have previous to the USSR falling, that might allow that transition to happen, and that this might ultimately have been their version of, the lesser of two evils version of their own government, authoritarian democracy before reaching full democracy or something like that. We could see, but no one will know until it collapses, and it will be ugly no matter what happens, just like exiting Afghanistan. That's why nobody wanted to deal with it until Biden did. So we got to take a break. We'll come back right after this with more questions from the chat room. And thank you. Don't forget, Hal Sparks Podcast, Mega Worldwide, on all your podcasting services. And, of course, Johnny Million's show twice a week at It's Johnny Million. And how?
Flora does not know what to do with herself. She's barely 6 pounds. Hal, did you freeze or are you reading?
I'm reading. I'm good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I sometimes will hold still for periods of time when I'm reading. I apologize.
Weird.
Yeah. Some would even say statuesque.
Debating on whether or not to take my cameras with me.
How big are they?
They're Sony FX30s. They're kind of DSLR size like this, but then you've got the lens. I could buy like cheapo tripods on the other side.
Yep.
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I'm still debating on whether or not to just go on hiatus,
Right.
or whether or not to keep trying on doing stuff. I'd hate to lose the momentum
Sure.
because we're doing pretty good. We got a good one this week. We talked with a Canadian senator. I didn't know Canada had senators. They're upper house. Upper house. And he's a Canadian Ukrainian. Because I don't know if you know this, there's a huge diaspora in Canada of Ukrainians that have been arriving in Canada for over 100 years. 125 years, and he is the first generation.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap with the same northern USA. There's a lot of overlap with those same communities. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
We talk about some good stuff.
Yeah.
I am happy, you are happy. Let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky. Let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. Because isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'm making breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Hoorah! So, yes, I think the good news ultimately is, and I will revisit what we talked about at the top of the show, is that Johnny Million is going to go see King's X tonight in Chicago. It's in St. Charles. Is it in St. Charles?
In St. Charles.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's going to be amazing. So if you're in the Chicagoland area, please go out and check out King's X tonight because we love them and with good reason. And do me a favor, I'm sure you've already hugged Ty for me, but hug Doug for me and Jerry as well. Jerry might be put off by the hug, but do it anyways. Tell him I insist.
I don't know if I've hugged Jerry yet. I'll give it a try.
Yeah. Tell him you can just send one from me. You don't actually have to act it out. Doug will take one. Doug will be fine. But just tell Jerry I insisted on sending him a hug, whether you deliver it physically or not.
Deal.
Just make the emoji, which it does look a little, which I have to say looks a little gropey.
Sure. Yeah.
Get
the hands involved.
Kind of like Gene the Jesus Machine on the Copeland Network when Kenneth Copeland yesterday said something about the homosexual lesbian spirits that have taken over the country.
In his USA flag jacket.
Right? Yeah. Just what oh God. And again, Kenneth Copeland's one of those guys, kind of like Trump looks these days. It looks like Vincent D'Onofrio in Men in Black. But if they left the skin on a chair, you know what I mean? Just deflated and gross. That's it. So I think that's enough.
I'll take the opportunity to shamelessly plug my episode this week.
Yes.
In a happy ending. Which is a happy ending? Because I think this is a good episode. We talk with Canadian Senator Stan Kuchar, who is himself of Ukrainian descent, because there's a really large Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, 1.5 million Canadians, about 4% of their population are descendants of Ukrainian refugees going back over a century. So this isn't a new thing. I mean, every time Moscow gets weak, Ukrainians go running for the doors, and oftentimes they've found a new home in Canada. He came to my attention because there was a recent controversy about a piece of Russian propaganda posing as a documentary that had been entered into the Toronto International Film Festival, and they pushed back against it because it was clearly propaganda. It was information warfare. It wasn't a documentary. And he participated in that. So we talk about the controversy, but then we also talk about the legacy of Ukrainians in Canada and Canadian support for the Ukrainian war. It's a subject that you probably will not hear anywhere else, but it's fascinating because there is this long-standing relationship between Canada and Ukraine, and the cultural exchange and the immigration that has happened, and of course now a massive influx of war refugees in the current era. So we talk about a whole bunch of stuff about things that you probably hadn't heard about before. So that'll be the good one. Again, every Sunday, except we're about to go on hiatus. I think we're still debating that. But every Sunday, normally 8 p.m. Kiev time, which translates to 10 a.m. Pacific. Tune in. It's another good one.
Absolutely. I think we got time for maybe one last question before we head out, Johnny Million. What do you got?
Sure thing. Yeah, I've got a really good one here from Tim Farrell. Is there a point where the lines blur between the Russian war chest and Putin's personal fortune?
Yeah, good question, Tim.
Where he has to start cracking into his own money?
I mean, but the answer is probably not looking at in terms of like, is the defense budget Vladimir Putin's personal war chest? I don't, or personal piggy bank. I don't think so. I think Putin has already skimmed so much and stolen so much from the Russian coffers that I don't think he's dipping into the defense funds, especially since he knows that a catastrophic loss in Ukraine, which in my humble opinion is now an inevitability, will mean he will lose power. And when he loses power, he won't just, he's not just going to go off to his mansion in Sochi on the Black Sea and live the rest of his life out in peace and serenity. No, there's going to be a cost to be paid. So I don't think he's going to be dipping into the defense funds because he needs to have a victory or something that he can call victory here in Ukraine. So he's not going to be taking money from the defense. Will he go the other direction and start funding the defense or some other organ of Russia's intelligence community or whatever it is? Well, also probably not, because the man is craven. So it's a good question, and I don't think we define it in terms of a blur of lines, because what is Putin's, and what is the defense ministry's is the defense ministry. And while in peacetime he could have maybe skimmed out of that, now with the way things are, I doubt very much he's going to touch any of that money, because it's his. It'll depend it'll decide whether or not he lives or not, or what his legacy will be. So, but a good question.
And on that, I want to
squeeze one more in on that.
Yeah, we get maybe one more quick one if we had one. Yeah,
real quick one.
Johnny.
Are there any imports like medicine being hindered by the war? That's from Nick Rich.
Yes. Yes, there are, but in terms of logistics and in terms of getting those things to where they need to go, because the closer you get to the front lines, the more difficult it is to maneuver around with any kind of large, any kind of large amount of things to be distributed because the Russians will hit it. It's not an issue of a border or bringing goods into the country. It's a matter of distributing them.
Right. On that note, I also want to mention before we go that this Victoria Roshchina, who was a Ukrainian journalist who was taken into custody by the Russians, was going to be exchanged. Yep, and she died in Russian custody on her way to Moscow. 28 years old, a journalist in eastern Ukraine, had been reporting on the war, and she was killed by the Russians. Rather than give her back because of what she'd seen.
Being a journalist.
Yep, that's
Just
it.
Being a journalist. No
that's
other
right.
crime.
So
and that's not a crime. Being a journalist is not a crime.
No, it is not. Thanks so much. Thank you, Philip Bittner. Thanks, Johnny Million. Thanks to our listeners and everybody for hanging in there when we had our technical kerfuffle. I'll see you on Monday for Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. And see you tonight in sexy liberal Kansas City if you're going to be there.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Flora's playing the long game here. She's looking for some food.
As you do. All right, I'm going to let you go so I can let my computer cool because it's going to burn a hole through the table. And
I may not be able to join you on Wednesday. I'll let you know.
Yeah, just keep me posted.
Get some ribs.
I will be Wednesday morning. Yeah, I'm still in Kansas Wednesday morning.
My bet is next Saturday. I probably won't be able to make it.
Okay.
But we shall see.
All right, we'll see if we can get Boston Brian to fill in or something.
All right.
Excellent.
Take care, John.
All right.
Johnny.
Cheers.
Bye,
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Thank